Welcome to another episode of Hello Again Wednesday with Brent Miller. Each Wednesday you can join in as a special guest. Answer along with the question of the day. Listen to life stories. Follow him on Spotify or your favorite podcast platform. On Facebook. Or his YouTube channel, Brent Miller What's on His Mind. This week's episode 129. Meet the press. Scratch that. Meet the neighbors. And now.
All right. It is Hello Again Wednesday, episode number 129. I want to thank you, as always, for being my special guest as you join me week after week. Thank you for doing that. One of the things I always ask, please share these videos. Click the old like button or whatever kind of emoji you want to put on that. Please click like and share, and you can always check them out, like it said earlier, on all those channels. You can tell your friends, hey, they can even listen to the podcast or watch the podcast as they're jogging on their morning run or whatever. So if you can do that, please go ahead and do that for me. It just kind of is a little booster to me that people are watching, and I will keep doing this as long as what I can. So thanks for being my special guest. And I said this in the past too. Hey, maybe one day we'll hook up to where we can do it, where I actually have a live episode with a live guest. I mean, you're live as you click on and watch, but to be a part of this segment would be great. And we can do that to where we can interact together. I've got it all set up and ready to where we can handle that. And maybe I'll take your question and make your question of the day. And we'll go from there on your question of the day, as you would be then my really live special guest. Keep watching, keep clicking, keep sharing. And we'll just keep on doing that as you guys join in on the conversation. I grew up young, and some of this may sound repetitions every once in a while because it's my life stories and stuff like that, because I'm telling stories. But I grew up young with racing home. And, back then we'd walk home from school blocks, and I'd be in kindergarten or first grade or whatever, and up at Henrietta and in Rockford, Illinois. And I would race home so I could watch a lot of the episodes on television. One of my favorites back then was even pretending as I watched to be underdog. And not like these live movies that they have nowadays, but the old cartoon with Tennessee Tuxedo and stuff like that. That was during the Bullwinkle and Rocky Show days and stuff. But I would enjoy racing home to watch Underdog. I would grow up watching Sesame Street when it first started. Yes, when it first started. Grew up watching Sesame Street when the cast was just small and starting off. We also watched Captain Kangaroo. Captain Kangaroo was one of my favorite shows, also with Mr. Green Jeans and Mr. Moose. I loved Mr. Moose because Mr. Moose was always making ping pong balls fall out of the sky. I mean, hundreds of ping pong balls. One of my favorite little bits that they would have on Captain Kangaroo. Some of the things that I would watch. Now, I did not watch this show, but as an adult now, I realize what a great, if I may use the word that's being spread around now, influencer. No one used that word back then. He was just a great television host, and he was a good man, Mr. Rogers. And his show was Mr. Rogers in the Neighborhood, or the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood, or something like that. Like I said, I didn't watch the show, but I did see segments later on as I grew up. His catchphrase was, "Won't you be my neighbor?" And I can remember him sitting down and undoing shoes and putting different shoes on, or his sweater or whatever. And it was, "Won't you be my neighbor?" Or what was the other thing? "It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood." I think was also on that show. That stuff kind of reminds me and brought me to my thought process to today's episode of Hello Again Wednesday. So I'm going to give you it is another twofer question of the day. So it's more than one. Do you know your neighbors? Do you know your neighbors? The other part of the question would be this: how did you meet or become introduced to your neighbors? Not just because they live next to you, but how did you meet them and become introduced to them? I imagine every one of you has a neighbor story. Some neighbor stories are good. Probably some neighbor stories are bad. I understand that. Growing up in the late 60s and 70s as a kid, we probably viewed our neighbors differently as a kid through rather than through the lenses of an adult. As a kid, we looked at neighbors a whole different way. For me, there was some super nice neighbors, the Oakleys. They lived right next to us, and if we were to look outside of our front door, there was a porch, and it went to Royal Avenue, and on the other side was the not really condemned, but boarded up. The old St. Pat's School or St. Patrick's School was right there on Royal Avenue, and it was boarded up, made a great area. It had a flagpole still, and it had some pine trees that grew up. It made great obstacles for doing stickball. Man, we would play stickball, hitting the ball across the street and stuff like that. Certain levels on the wooded, boarded up windows was home runs and stuff like that. Man, we had all kinds of things in our neighborhood. But the Oakleys lived on what would be then the right side of us. And as they lived there, they also would do things. They were older couple. It was Mr. and Mrs. Oakley, an older couple. We shared a driveway that went up between the two houses, and then our garage was on one side of this because it opened. The driveway really opened up big, and it looped because it opened up big. We went to our garage. They had a huge 3 or 4 car garage on their side, and then it looped to the next neighbor's house to them. And we had some friends that lived in the apartment upstairs, I believe, or downstairs. I mean, times had changed, but that's how our arrangement was made. And the Oakleys, they never really, they were super nice. We used to we'd climb up the mulberry tree, and we'd jump on the new garage roof that my dad had built. It was a huge garage. I mean, tall. And so it was taller than Mr. Oakley's 4-car garage. And we would jump from one garage to the next. And so, I mean, it was a space. It was a walkway that went down between the garages. And we would, build snow forts in there when it snowed really bad. And, but we would jump garage to garage. We also did it to the neighbors behind us and behind that garage, and they were not as nice. But Mr. Oakley, here's how I remember Mr. Oakley. He was an old guy with, he'd always have a cigar in his mouth, and it usually would be, a stubby. Just a real short cigar. He'd smoked most of it or whatever. And we had a little bit of grass in his yard, and so he would have, and I have one now too, he would have one of those push lawnmowers. No gas, no electricity. It was one of those little clipper things, and he would just trim his little lawn with that clipper, and you'd hear it go, brrr, it would make that sound or whatever. And so that was one of the things of Mr. Oakley. Mrs. Oakley, she always made us some treats. And she always had a smile. Oh my goodness, such a sweet lady. And then Mr. Oakley was he loved catfishing. And I can remember he would hang some big old catfish or carp or whatever that he would get out of the Rock River or whatever, and he would hang them on his. We had both. We had one and they had one. The clothesline, only it was steel, came out like a cross, and he would hang that fish, his fish from those things sometimes. But that was the Oakleys. They were on that side of the house. And just, some good memories with them. The other side, I can't remember his name right offhand. Maybe my mom and dad remember, but to me, he wasn't as nice. I know it had something to do with us a little bit, because what he did is he hated if we were in the backyard. And see, we back back then you just roamed yards and played. And so we were in the back of our yard playing ball or something, or toys or frisbee, and it would go over the fence into his yard. I know he was growing a garden stuff sometimes, but it would go over there, and he would just kind of be very irritated at us, of throwing things into, not throwing, accidentally having stuff go into his yard. Then you had the surrounding neighbors. Okay, I had an opening picture of a neighborhood. We had surrounding neighbors, and man, you knew everybody. The Camachos, Dean and Steve Camacho. They were two brothers that lived two houses down. So you had the neighbor that was not so nice, and then you had Dean and Steve's house, and their dad and mom. Their dad was, I believe, of a Latino, and their mom was actually British, and so that was quite a makeup there. And that, man, we heard the accent right away growing up. But anyways, they got us involved in scouting, and we played together since we were tiny kids. I mean, like I said, they were just two doors down, and we'd play on each other's porches, go in each other's houses and stuff. If you went just around the corner, see, this is one block. He went around the corner. There was Danny Ronan. Danny Ronan, he was the kid whose parents, if I remember correctly, they owned the only pink two-story house in the neighborhood. It was easy to know where Danny Ronan lived. And then there was others. I could list off, and I would list off a bunch of friends of neighbors of my level, neighbors. Bobby, Yvette, Andy. Dad worked, I believe, with Andy's dad. And then there was Daniel and Terry and Stefan. I'm still friends with Stefan. I have Stefan on Facebook. He's always talking about his mom. His mom was another sweet lady. They lived right across the street from Henrietta. And so we could go over to their house and hang out. And so I remember Stefan, Earl. Last time I saw Earl, I think, was Trent's funeral. And the list is huge of people I could just rattle off that we hung out with day after day. Those, you back then, in the neighborhood, you knew whose house that you could cut through the yard to make up time, especially if you're trying to get to school. Because we walked to school, we ran to school, all the way down to McIntosh and Wilson. And then my dad joined the Army, and I'll talk about that and just rejoin the Army in just a minute. But we would walk down to McIntosh and Wilson, like I said, and those were a long way. So you knew which yards you could cut through, which ones you shouldn't cut through. Like I said, there's good and bad. We knew which ones we could do. Or if we were playing out late, we knew whose we could cut through to get home on time, because you had to be home. And when the street lights were on, that still didn't count as daylight. You learned that early on. Growing up, like I said, my dad rejoined the military. And so we were then a military family. And you had to do this. You had to learn to know your neighbors often, and sometimes for only short periods of times, because in the military, they were always coming in and out. And so I think it was easy to discover friends right away because they were doing the same thing. They would only see us for, 2-3 years. It depended on the cycle of their deployment and stuff. And so we were trying to make friends fast and furious. Even before the movies came out, we were trying to do it as quick as what we could and hang on to those friends. The first deployment my dad had was to start off for his second time around, and that was down in Fort Gordon, Georgia, in Augusta. And so we went down there. And right away, you're trying to hook up with friends. Ben Young, I loved Ben Young. Ben Young had a really cool Mustang back then. Liz Basler was at Langford. And Andy Rutherford, still friends with Andy Rutherford. Andy Rutherford is, he's pastoring down in Marietta, Georgia. And so not too far from Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken on how that fixes out. Andy Rutherford, still friends with him, still friends with Faith McGee. Her name's not McGee anymore. She married one of the guys. Man, his name slips me for just the moment. Ann Skinner. This was the group that we had that we met at church, because we went to church. And so besides on the military base, you met friends on church, and you're only there for a short time, but you tried to meet up with them fast, and you stayed at their houses and hooked up with them. That was the neighborhood thought process. Same with a guy when living on base. We would go out and shoot hoops in the like you had this tiny little backyard because it was military housing, and we were in a duplex or triplex or whatever it was. And you go outside of your little patio, and there was a bunch of pine trees, red dirt. It was Georgia. We pounded up a basketball hoop on one of the trees, and we would go out and clear away the pine needles. And on the red dirt, we would shoot hoops with another guy named Andy. Just I can't remember his last name. Just some good times in the neighborhood. I probably told this story before with right from Augusta. Then we got deployed over to Belgium to S.H.AP.E, Supreme Headquarters, Allied Powers, Europe. And so we're in Belgium, about 45 minutes south of Brussels. And first day arriving at school, it would have been my ninth grade year, just starting high school. And we started it in the middle of the school year. And that's rough to make friends when school is already halfway through. And so we came in late February or something like that, over to S.H.AP.E American High School. And so going into school that first day, talk about the neighborhood. At that time we were in the hotel. Every military brat maybe will tell you this. You had to stay in a certain hotel until you got your housing on base or housing somewhere else. And so we were waiting for our housing on base, which was an apartment right across the street from the school complex, as in a kindergarten, an elementary school, a middle school, and then the two high schools was the American side and the international side. We were right there across the street. But that first day in school, meeting a neighbor, and his name was Dean Snodgrass. And so I go into the office. They give you your room numbers and let me think a minute, what courses you have. So room numbers, teachers, and course assignment. And they told Dean Snodgrass to take me to my first class. And so I'm introduced to him. He's probably, later looking back, find out he really probably wasn't the best friend to have, because he was not a very good influence of the experiences that he was sharing. In fact, he was in trouble when he was in the office. So this troublemaker was taking me to my first class. And I liked Dean. I mean, he was a cool guy. We hung out for a few years while he was there. And so it's how you start friendships in your neighborhood. And that man, Steve Truesdale, his brother Bill, Debbie Cavazos, her sister Wendy, who's still on Facebook, Cindy, who is, I can't remember her last name. She's a stewardess. Nala's over in Phoenix. Megan Shutt's up over in, unless her name's changed to something else. Megan's up in Thousand Oaks, which is just up the street. Daniela is down in Huntington Beach. They're still in my neighborhood. It's almost like I'm a bad person, though I don't go and visit them as I should, maybe once in a while. But anyways, it's still in the neighborhood. And so, you know what? Life went on. And so before I'm here, spent 10 years besides Rockford and Loves Park and McChesney Park, I spent 10 years down in Pekin with the family. And we lived in we lived in this complex. It was a 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom house rental complex. And so the kids ran the neighborhood. Our kids now ran the neighborhood. And just you met friends side by side. Some would come and some would go because it was rental. But we stayed in our house for 10 years before moving out to California. And so, you know what? Life goes on. And you had to learn the introductions of jobs, besides that in your neighborhood. And with that, you learn to, they became not just in your neighborhood, but sometimes they were in your neighborhood. I mean, I had jobs in the neighborhood. And for me, it was many jobs and many, many introductions. Okay. And so I believe you can have the neighborhood be your church, the church in your neighborhood, maybe. And so with that, you have many friends. I mentioned a bunch from Augusta, Georgia. The thing with all of these neighbors, man, Mr. Farr, I call him this. He was, man, his first name has lost me. They lived right across the street from us on Royal Avenue. But anyways, they become lifelong friends. A lot of times your neighbors become lifelong friends. My dad and mom still have friends from Augusta, if I'm not mistaken. Lifelong friends. We lived now on the farthest west side of Los Angeles, near Marina del Rey, on the ocean. We lived there for 13 years now, and we've had just very few neighbors change. We have an apartment across the street from us. And even there, the neighbors, man, once they move in, they kind of stay for a long time. I have some neighbors that have been in that apartment that, hey, I've seen your grandkids grow up and stuff like that for, 11 years, 12 years, 11 years. And so they stay. And we lived in our neighborhood that we're in, where the church owns a parsonage, used to be long ago a Japanese neighborhood. And, throughout the years, a lot of them are still here and of age, right on the one side of us, good neighbors. We're always watching out for one another. And then on the other side, when we first moved out, the gentleman had passed, but now we have other neighbors that are there. But it's rare that they change. And so they become, 13-year neighbors. You know what? Here's this. If you stay outside, or you work outside, or you play in your front yard, you get to know many of your neighbors. We look down the street, and there's a lot of times where people are hardly out. We're always, trying to be outside. And we meet neighbors. We tell stories with them. We laugh with them. We even begin to hear their heartaches as you come to know your neighbors. And you can too. Yesterday, a lady, I say yesterday, now it's, I think, 2 days now. A lady came walking up the sidewalk, and she was walking a St. Bernard, a kind of a smaller St. Bernard, a real pretty one. And as she got closer and closer, we're outside, we're playing catch with me and the boys, and I see her walking up, getting closer and closer, and then it dawned on me once she got up here that it was someone who used to pass in front of the house quite often, and she had a bigger St. Bernard. And I asked her, if one time, just to make sure, hey, you ever think you see someone and maybe you're wrong. But I asked her, hey, did you ever have a bigger St. Bernard? And she was like, yeah. And it was a male St. Bernard, and those are usually bigger, but this was an old male St. Bernard that she had for many years. He was really slow, always slow walking. The dog park is just at the corner. And so she would always walk the dog that way, and it'd be a slow walk. And so, you got to see the St. Bernard and stuff like that. Well, now she stopped, and we're talking about the new St. Bernard she has, which is a female. And that dog just loved to be petted. And so now she's walking a new dog to the dog park. Just some of the things that took place of the neighbors that we meet. The same day, maybe just a half hour later, we're still out in front playing. And now, because the boys what they're doing is they're practicing catch so that they get better, because they're playing a few weeks of baseball at the Boys and Girls Club. And so they wanted to get better. And now I see a guy riding his bike up the road, and he's got a dog on a leash, and the dog's trotting along beside him, kind of like a real pretty, what do you call those long-haired labs? But it's not a lab. I can't remember what they call them. Anyways, real pretty dog running along the leash. And now the bike, I have my back to him, and the bike stops in the road. And he calls over to me, and the conversation kind of goes like this. Hey, I just wanted to thank you. The kids were so nice to me the other day as I was passing by. I heard the dogs barking, and I realized that I realized that on my way to the dog park, again, because he has a dog, which is at the end of the block, on the way to the dog park, I had forgotten the dog bags. You need a dog bag in case, you can guess. And so the guy goes, I asked, let me get my notes. I asked for one, and without hesitation, they were glad to oblige you. Yeah, we'll go get you one. They go running in the house, and they get a dog bag for the guy. And he goes like this. By the way, I think he said, by the way, I'm your neighbor, Pete. And so then I introduced myself. And this is how it works. This is how you're in your neighborhood and you begin to meet people day after day. So now he goes on his way, and I thought, wow, that was really cool. I thought it was cool for this reason, that the kids, someone needed help, and as in a doggy bag, and they went and got a dog bag. And then I meet a new neighbor in the neighborhood, and it all involved a simple conversation of a dog. Past couple Sundays in church, please bear with me. I'm going to try and hurry up here. The past couple Sundays in church, I've been sharing stories about Jesus hanging out with neighbors, okay? And he was eating and drinking with them. See, because Jesus had this. He was on a mission on this earth. He was born, and he was born for a specific mission, and that was to save everyone. But he also had a strategy on how to do it. And that was hang out with whoever he would get to hang out with him, and he would eat with them, and he would drink with them, and then he would get to know them. For me, as a follower of Jesus, we're told that we have a mission. Go and make disciples. But first, we need to introduce them to Jesus. You don't just make a disciple. You have to introduce them to Jesus. And what better strategy than to take Jesus' strategy? Hang out with your neighbors, eat with them, dine with them, drink with them, and get to know them. I know some neighbors ain't going to hang out with us. Some may even have issues with you, like I said earlier on. Some are kind of good, some are kind of bad. But let's just start, if that happens, where you have a situation with a neighbor, let's us start by forgiving our neighbors. It'll make the world a better place. And who knows, maybe down the road, you can actually eat and dine with those neighbors. So we have Bible study, talking about Jesus. We have Bible study here. I'm downstairs. This is the studio of the day. My office is upstairs. And so now I'm downstairs. I'm always going to keep you on your toes. Where's he going to do his Hello Again Wednesdays? Bible study is down here at 5:30. Now, if you don't have a church service to attend to in your area, in your neighborhood, we do ours also. And if I could, I'm going to just do this. Let's see here. Oops. You see right there? There's the screen. There's a projector. This is probably freaking all of you guys out. And so we actually Zoom at the same time that we're having Bible study down here. And so you can join us. If you want the Zoom link, let me know. I'll hook you up with the individual that has the Zoom link, and you can join right in with our Zoom Bible study. On Sundays at 10:45, we have our church service that is on Facebook. It's Culver City Church of God Ministries, or it's on our webpage, culvercitychurchofgod.org. We have that service live 10:45 Pacific time. And so if you don't have a church to get to, join us that way. But if you do, go ahead and try and find a Bible-believing church, one that's in your neighborhood maybe. And as you hang out with their Bible study or their church service, you can be with friends. You can laugh together. You can eat together. You can drink together. You can even meet new friends and maybe neighbors. So go ahead and be at those functions also. Let us all click, like, and share these videos. Please put your story of your introduction to neighbors in the comments. And so here's the reminder, the question of the day. Do you know your neighbors? How do you meet or become introduced to them? Oh, my phone is ringing. If you're watching this on YouTube, man, do the same thing. Click, like, share, subscribe, and I will see you. There it is. I'll see you next Wednesday on Hello Again Wednesday.
Thanks for watching or listening to this week's episode of Hello Again Wednesday with Brent Miller. Each Wednesday you can join in as his special guest. Answer along with the question of the day. Listen to life stories. Follow him on Spotify or your favorite podcast platform. On Facebook. Or his YouTube channel Brent Miller What's on His Mind. Please join him next Wednesday for another episode.